So I'm going to talk about red sunflower seed weevil since that's our #1 pest in South Dakota and North Dakota right now. And I'll give an update on pyrethroid resistance and where we're at, and then what's going on with insecticides for red sunflower seed weevil control. I'd like to acknowledge all my colleagues, Pat Bose from NDSU, Adam Varenhorst, Philip Roseboom, Madeleine McManus, and Patrick Wagner at South Dakota State. We've had a collaborative effort for the last 4 or 5 years. So I think everyone recognizes the red sunflower seed weevil. It's a very small weevil, reddish brown color. It's about 1/8 of an inch long. And being a snout weevil in the Curculionidae family, it has the snout on the front there, which makes it fairly easy to identify. And it's specific to sunflower. For damage, the larvae causes the damage, not the adult. The adult feeds on the pollen generated by the sunflower flowers. And the eggs are laid inside the seed. And then the larvae hatch from the eggs, and they'll start to feed on the kernel that's developing inside. And they usually consume about 1/3 of the kernel. And what you can imagine when we have high densities of the adult weevil, how many larvae are in those seeds and developing. It can reduce seed weight and yield significantly when the populations are economic. And we've relied on insecticides supplied by airplanes for a long time for management of weevils. Here's some of the IPM crop survey data for the last 2 years. And you can see that the red sunflower seed weevil is, fairly high in North Dakota. It was worse in 2022. You can see there's more red triangles here than 2023. But in South Dakota, they have a much bigger issue with the red sunflower seed weevil. And here's some results from the National Sunflower Association 2023 survey. And you can see that the seed damage here has gone up over the last several years, especially in South Dakota. And this is due primarily to red sunflower seed weevil. In North Dakota, we've been, relatively low, about 8% or less than 8% of the seed damage. But in South Dakota, due to their high populations of the weevil, it's up to 30%. And so it's been an uphill and increasing population there. Here's some work from Dr. Jared Persiska from the USDA Sunflower Unit. And there is a cultural control. So there is other methods for mitigating weevil populations. And early planting date and using early hybrids is one of the options. And you can see that it worked pretty well. Here, this is down in South Dakota where they have the high densities in Pierre. And you can see May 1st planting date, much lower percent red sunflower seed weevil damage to the seed. And the early planting date had lower numbers, although it doesn't look like it was significant. And then here is, you go out with your planting date into June, we had much higher damage to the seed. So planting early is an advantage and getting lower populations of red sunflower seed weevil. It's not like, with insecticides where we expect, 80, 90% control, but at least it helps to reduce the overall population. And the mid-May dates were in the middle. So it is an increasing trend line there. The later you plant, the higher the damage. And in South Dakota, it's really been a train wreck. We started getting calls on field failure with pyrethrites for weevils since 2017. So it's been the past 6 years we've been struggling with trying to control them with the current insecticides. And then we started doing some glass vial bioassays, and we had reduced populations and susceptibility or reduced susceptibility in 2020 and 2022. And then through the glass vial bioassays, we documented resistance since 2021. And we're continuing to look at this, and we'll discuss this in more detail. But the large population just continues to persist in South Dakota, and part of that is, due to the drought and hot, dry weather, which favors weevil reproduction. And probably the fact that the insecticides are not working for controlling the weevil has a lot to do with it as well. So here's what the glass vials look like. We put the insecticide inside there, and then we, put them on a hot dog roller, and it dries, and then we can release the insects into the vial, and then we assess mortality, usually at 24 and 48 hours. So the easiest way to explain what's going on is using resistance ratios, which is just the LD50 of a test population, which is South Dakota weevils divided by the LD50 of susceptible populations, the North Dakota weevils. And LD50 is the lethal dose where 50% of the weevils will die. So in general, resistant ratios less than 5, the population is still susceptible to that insecticide. When it's between 5 and 10, the population's moderately resistant. More than 10, highly resistant. So here's some data from South Dakota and Potter and Sully County. And it's pretty amazing to see some of these resistance ratios of over 8,000 for Delta Gold at both sites. So every pyrethroid that we tested, from Delta Gold, Warrior, Baythroid XL to Asana, they're all resistant. And here from the Dakota Lakes research, we see not quite as bad, only 3,000 for Delta Gold, but Warrior was always number 2, followed by Baythroid XL, and then Asana with a lower resistant ratios. And then if you go way out west to Sturgis at the West River Research Farm, you can see all of the insecticides and the populations are still susceptible. And probably because there's not as much sunflower grown, whereas the other locations were in central South Dakota, where we have a real concentration of sunflower production. So here's the map. The green spots are susceptible, and the yellow is moderately resistant, and the red highly resistant. And you can see it's concentrated in the central area of South Dakota, and all of our sampling sites in North Dakota are susceptible still. And so we're we don't know how far the red sunflower seed weevil flies, but we're hoping that it doesn't get up into North Dakota. So anyway, we have confirmed resistance to many different pyrethroids. So that pretty much tells us it is cross resistance when you have resistance developed to more than one active ingredient within a family, or it can even be, within different families. But in this case, it's within the pyrethroid group of insecticides. And the Baythroid and Delta Gold really hasn't been used that much. In sunflower, we mainly use Warrior 2 and Asana XL. So that definitely also supports the theory of cross resistance. So what do we have registered currently? It's mainly just our pyrethroids for control of the weevil. And then we have 7 in the carbonate group, and then a premix, which has pyrethroid and then the coragen diamine, which is not very effective against weevils. It's more for caterpillars and grasshoppers. So I'm going to give you the results of our insecticide study just in North Dakota at the Minot North Central Research Extension Center. And we looked at the untreated check, and then in the gray box is all the pyrethroids that we tested. And then we added exponent, which is a synergist for pyrethroid. And you can see it's added at different rates based on previous testing. And then Entrust, which is a spinosad, a natural occurring bacterium. And then malathion, which is organophosphate, and penicillin, which is a new one we'll talk about from Syngenta at a mid and high rate. So penicillin is from Syngenta Crop Protection, and it's a group 30 isoxylenes, and it's a GABA receptor antagonist, so it's a neurotransmitter in the insect's brain that we interfere with, so it's unable to function. So this is a good fit for where we do have insecticide resistance issues, and because it is a novel mode of action that insects have not been exposed to. And we're hoping to see it in 2026 for some of the large acreage crops like cotton, soybean, corn, and wheat in the US. So it will be coming. It's not available yet. So here's some of the results. This is percent mortality in the different rates of penicillin. This was in the glass vial bioassays just to see if it worked in both North and South Dakota. And you can see we got excellent results, 94 and above for mortality. And again, this was the lab glass vial bioassay. So here's some of the information from the field, and it's percent damaged seed. You can see in the early planting date, we had 12.5% damage. And if we take a look at the penicillin, we had only 1.6 and 2.4. And they were usually comparable to our pyrethroids here with and without the exponent. And malathion was probably the least efficacious insecticide with a 4.3, but still that's, fairly good and significant from the damaged seed and the untreated. And Entrust looked pretty good as well. We planted May 22nd, so we would get moderate populations of weevil. Okay, if we take a look at the yield for that early planting day, you can see the line's pretty flat, but we did get a significant difference from the untreated check, which had the lowest yield. And all the insecticides had significantly higher yield except Baythorite and Exponent and malathion from the untreated check. So if we take a look at the late planting date, June 7th, you can see again, we had a little bit higher percent damaged seed, almost 16 in the untreated. But panazelin again was comparable to the pyrethrites with and without the exponent. And malathion seemed to work a little bit better. And again, Entrust went up, though it didn't seem to work as well. But it was still better than the untreated check, and all the insecticides had increased efficacy of red sunflower seed weevil. Here's the yield data. This was not significant in the late planting date, and I believe it was probably due to drought that was present in the later planted sunflower. It was quite severe up at Minot. So we could take a look at the insecticides. The pyrethroids are known for being cheap, and sure enough, they're the cheapest. They add on the exponent, though, they get quite expensive. And then the trust was very high, but we are trying to look at alternatives here. It's not currently registered in sunflower, and then the malathion was, high as well. Panazelin, we don't know how much that one is going to cost. So just to give you a quick update on what's going on with chlorpyrifos, lorsban, and generic products. And as you know, it was all the crops that were originally labeled with chlorpyrifos active ingredient, all their tolerances have been restored by EPA recently. So they're all registered now and available for all the crops that had labels previously. So that includes sunflower, alfalfa, corn, soybean, sugar beet, spring and winter wheat. So we do have it back for the time period for 2024. However, there's not much product that is in the market right now. Pretty much were shut down, all the plants that produce chlorpyrifos. So if you check the Kelly database solutions for the pesticides with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture, we only have 2 right now, Pilot 4E, which is a foliar that could be applied by airplane, and Pilot 15G, which is a granular mainly for sugar beet root maggots. So, and this is a code here if you want to get to the solutions database. We do expect some other generics that may be registered before spring. But if you do want to use lorsban, it would be good to get your hands on the product as soon as possible because it's going to be very limited. And we do expect EPA to eventually issue a new proposed ruling, which will revoke tolerance for all but 11 crops that were specified in the 2020 proposed interim pesticide or insecticide. So anyway, those exclude sunflower and corn. So then we'll just be left with these that are registered. And we also may see some additional restrictions due to the Endangered Species Act, but that is still being discussed. And last year, the Endangered Species Act was 50 years old. So, and with that, I'd like to thank everyone for your attention. If you want more information, there's some more presentations on red sunflower seed weevil on the National Sunflower Association research forum, and you can download them as a PDF. And it's on diseases, weeds, birds, genetics, and more. And also, if you're not signed up for our NDSU Extension Crop and Pest Report, please do, because we do give you updates on pests in all field crops during the season on when's a good time to get out and scout and when we're seeing stuff in the state. It is an award-winning newsletter from the Agronomy Society. So that's all I had. Thanks to the National Sunflower Association for funding the weevil research and the chemical companies.